Hi, my name's Mark, and welcome back to Three Bridges if you're returning, and welcome if you're new to finding my YouTube channel. So I'm documenting building my new layout. I haven't built a layout for about 40 years, 45 years. And if you've watched any of the early ones, you'll know that I'm currently on like a temporary structure in a bedroom. Uh, the good news is I now have a new house. We have a loft space. It's great. I just need to sort out power, electrics, lights, floorboards, stuff like that. So I didn't want to build the whole layout in one go throughout the whole of the loft and spend a year making the whole structure and boards to build the layout on. So I'm building this layout one board at a time. My first board is about a meter, just over a meter long, 30 centimeters deep, and it revolves around Wendover station in Buckinghamshire, which is on the Chiltern line. And this is the first station on my first railway journey that I remember. So I'm 5 years old. I'm travelling up to London with my parents just before Christmas. Obviously, it's not Christmas in the scenery I'm setting, but that's the memory. And so I want to recreate a Wendover station from 1968. So last time I built the platforms, the main station buildings, they've sort of been kit bashed from the scale scenes platform aisle kit. And I've done a little bit of the scenics. As you can see, I've got the road down, back, and had a go at doing some initial scenery area. I'm not going to do a tutorial on any of this. This was literally my first sort of 2 hours having a go, paints and the scatters and what have you. So I'll keep working at it. It's an initial thing, but I learned a lot doing it, which was great fun. So what I'm going to do in this episode is 2 scratch builds. So the first one is going to be a little cafe that sits here. So I remember as a child, there was a green building. It's a wooden hut. And in the early 70s, you could access it from the platform and get a coffee and a tea and cigarettes and papers and stuff like that. My parents were the sort of parents who never spent money when they didn't have to, so I never got a drink. Later on, they sort of closed it off from the platform side, but it was used by a designer, and they changed the doors and he could access it from the back. I know that because when we bunked off for lunch during the mid-teens, which we did every lunchtime, we stared through the letterbox one day and the guy threw his keys at Mark, my friend. So I do remember the green structure. It's gone now, so I had to recreate it from memory. So the way I went about it was I tried to use Inkscape again, following Michael Channel's great advice that he gives. So I'm not going to do any Inkscape tutorials or anything like that. If you are interested in it, go and see Michael Channel's channel. He gives loads of brilliant advice. I am a total novice. So as you can see, I've created a wraparound structure. It's just a simple wooden building. I've tried to replicate the sort of slats through the white lines, and then I just use the Inkscape colouring to pick a green and a yellow interior. So a really simple building, and then sort of done the double wall at one end so that I can fit the front and the back, and then using the scale scenes corrugated roofing, I built a roof. And for those of the more observant, you'll see that I've put the corrugation the wrong way round, so it's going horizontal instead of vertical. So I'm blaming my dodgy builders, Barry and Steve, again. Okay, so when I put it together, that's obviously what it looked like. So I've got a simple counter inside. I still need to put some more internal details, having a look. So back in the 60s, cigarette machines were everywhere, and I'll try and include, I don't know, something on the counter and maybe a person in there. For the front, I've tried to use the sticky label method to make windows, which this is my first attempt. So the window bars are really thick. That has improved over the last year, and my sticky method windows are much better, and I'll show those in later ones. But this at the moment, I've left it so I can attach it and take it on and off whilst I build the insides. And then the roof, I'm going to eventually wire up this one. So I'm going to use Wendover to try out a lot of things. So I'm going to light the buildings just to see if I want to do it for the rest of the layout. I'm just using this very much as a testing ground for how much detail and what I go to. So that would have sat there, and yeah, it's, as an initial, pretty pleased with it. So that was the simple one. Okay, the big challenge for this time though is to build the Wendover bridge that goes from platform 1 to platform 2. So the two images on the screen in front of you show you what I'm trying to replicate. So it's the classic lattice structured bridge that you get, and like the buildings, it's all along the line, the Chiltern line. You see these same structures and around the country. So the only difference with Wendover, the covered part of it is for the passengers to travel from platform 1 and 2 between the two sides, and then there's a second part which is the uncovered part in front. You might just be able to make it out. So it's like a double bridge, and that allowed the public to cross the railway line at this point, and you could cross from the station car park to some sports fields behind. And I sort of said in an earlier one, I know that's the case because I know the first time I used that bridge to walk over on the public side, it was Jeremy Alton's 8th birthday football match on the cricket pitch, although we weren't on the centre of the cricket pitch, for anybody who gets irate about that. So again, I went back to Inkscape and spent quite a lot of time drawing this up. So I decided to draw up the brick supports for the two bridges first, and then I had the steps up sections, and then I tried to envisage some sort of way to put together 4 layers that would allow me to build the lattice structure. As you can tell, it's a fairly simple lattice structure because I didn't want to end up having to cut out a lot of little sections. So having drawn it all up, printed it out, I then realized that cutting out all those shapes was just going to be nigh on impossible, and this approach wasn't really going to work. Okay, so the approach I went for to make the lattice structure was I kept the 2 layers, and I'm trying to, if I can get it in focus, I basically sandwiched the lattice between the 2. So I cut out thin strips of the blue card, and basically just glued them all on to one, and then re-glued them again, and then stuck it over top, and then basically bashed the whole thing in blue paint, and it sort of gave the structure from the distance. So that's the way I had to go about it. So I had to make that part, and then for the passenger side, obviously the same again. So you can sort of see how the bridge works with the 2 parts to it. So I'll just put the bridge up in the structure. So this is the simple brick supports that you get at the station when there's a little door underneath. It's like a half-person height door. So obviously you had some station platform storage. So that one was going to sit there. And then obviously this is where then it would lead off down. And if in the loft layout I have more space, I will then be able to create a bit more scenery at the side of the board. If not, I'll sort of chop it at that point. And so you had the corresponding support at the other side. Just trying to get it's about there. Okay, so that one was going to go there. Then made the easier part was to make the steps up. So what I decided in the end to do was I just freehand cut everything. So based off the initial measurements, I just went back to the cardboard and a pencil, drew it all out, and I basically did it in 2 layers, and then put the cross structured in, and then just painted the whole thing up. Obviously it looks a bit nice and bright and blue. It's a bit faded at Wendover now, but back in the 60s, you know, they kept on top of painting everything, and so it was always nicely painted up. So that one would have sat there. You've got the same at the other side. I chickened out of doing individual steps because it just felt like a nightmare for my first build, and because there is no depth behind to put the step. So basically I've taken the slatted wood scale scenes, paper, and it gives the impression of steps. Okay, making steps is one for later on. Obviously, then having done that, I then came on to building the bridge. So it went together quite well. I know the lattice is giant. I know health and safety would say this would never work because you could literally climb through it. But from a distance, it gives that perspective. Don't forget, this is the recreation of me being 5 years old, so it feels like quite childlike, but I've grown to like it over the year since I made it. I did have a go at making some steps this time, and it was very much a first attempt, but I learned a lot from that and what I will and won't do in the future, and I guess the wooden boarding. So, having then built it, I then come back to this, where I've then laid the track permanently, ballasted it, I put the station platforms back, and then took my lovely new bridge and went to fit it to discover, it's that way around, that when I come to line it up, as you can see, I've run out of platform, and it just sticks way far too out this side, falling off the platform almost. God, that was a painful day, because I realised that, in fact, hang on, I think that's a better shot showing you how the bridge is too large for the gap between my platforms. So yeah, it was a painful one. I mulled this one for several weeks as to, do I remake the bridge again, which I didn't really want to do as I spent so much time on it. And so eventually I realised that the simplest solution was to remake the platform and just bring it out here following the enter of the board and then go back, and that would make the bridge sit on it, and probably nobody would ever notice that I'd made the error. Apologies, I'm just going to have to handhold this part. So you can see the platform comes out and it takes the bridge, and then on the other side, obviously I need to do some steps down into behind the station for the public access. So I've managed to, again, I just scratch built the whole of this because it was just too impossible to try and design up on paper. I sometimes find it easier to just have a go. So they'll all join up. Next thing I've really got to do is just glue the whole bridge together, cover over some of the seams, and then if you go back to the original Wendover picture, there's probably a name for these things, these strange red things. Somebody will know. I assume they would deflect something from a, it must be part of the structure. Anyway, I've made them, I just need to attach them. So we'll sort that out in the future. Yeah, so pretty pleased with it. For the next one, I've got to make another one of these. Glutton for punishment. So my next station down the line will be Amersham, and that'll be the start of my underground as well. So I'm having an underground DCC layout alongside this DC layout for my old rolling stock. The track will never meet, so the trains don't run on each other's, so I can keep the two separate. The other one's in red, and obviously what I'm going to work on is how to do that latticing better. I've got an idea picked up from Everard Junction, where Richard's using car materials to make fencing, and as soon as he said it, it was just a no-brainer as to, yeah, why worry about the lattice structure when you can just get the mesh that they use to reinforce panels when you're doing car repairs. So brilliant idea, and I'll give that a go. Okay, I think I'll leave it there for this one. For next time, I'm gonna just need to finish off the scenery at the far end. You can see I've started to do on the embankment, so I'll talk about that, and why you can see quite a lot of white. So we're on the chalk here, and also there's the coal yard behind, and the story that I remember about that I'll share from my childhood as well. And then I just need to get signage, some fencing in, and I think this part of the layout is pretty much good to go. So The next board on is a scenic step going through the Chilterns. I'm not going to bother doing that yet because I'm still trying to work out what the gap is between this station and the next station that I can fit into the loft layout. But I will be starting on the next station, Amersham. So a lot of the Amersham structure is built. It's very much similar. Again, you've got the long thin buildings, and it's very much similar again. So you've got the long thin buildings and the station canopies, but there's a lot more at Amersham to build, and obviously then I've got to fit in the start of my DCC London Underground as well, which I'm excited to do. Anyway, thank you for watching, and maybe I'll catch you next time. Cheers.